I appreciate my mother. My mother lived a hell of a life and did many outstanding things. She went against all odds and accomplished many things in her life. When my mother was a young girl, she was in boarding school like all Indian kids in those days. It was the 1930s. At that time, tuberculosis was going around the country, in Canada too. So there were 5 sanatoriums set up in America, specifically for Indian people. So then doctors started to visit the boarding schools to see if any Indian kids had it. And unfortunately, my mother had tuberculosis. She was 11 years old, and she was taken right from the school. The nurse took her to a room and had my mother take her clothes off, and they just burned her clothes and her blanket that she used in the dormitory and her other clothes immediately. And they gave her hospital clothes, house coat and pajamas and slippers, and they put her in a car and off to the sanatorium. The closest one was Rapid City, South Dakota. And this used to be a military training center, but they transformed it later into this sanatorium for Native Americans in the upper Midwest and into Canada. So a lot of natives from the upper Midwest and lower Canada were sent there that had tuberculosis. They had tuberculosis and they were sent to this Rapid City Sioux Sanatorium. That's what it was called, Sioux Sanatorium. And people would call it Sioux-San for short. So my mother didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to her parents because she was at boarding school. And her parents lived on a ranch out in the country, but they lived like about 100 miles from the boarding school. And she was taken to Rapid City, which was in the other direction, another 150 miles. In those days, not many Indians had cars. People usually did things by team and wagon. So she was taken to this hospital at 11 years of age, and she stayed there from 11 years old to 18 years old. When she was 16, she seemed to get better. And she said they took some kind of medicine that was pink, a pink fluid. And she said the doctor said she was well enough to go home at 16. So she went back to the reservation. She stayed there for a few months and it came back again. So they had to take her back to Sioux-San until she was 18 years old. And then these doctors in America, they had this idea, because there was no cure for it in those days. But these doctors, they had this idea. For those of you that don't know, America is a very racist country. And a lot of times when doctors are going to try something, they'll try it on minorities first to see if it works before they will try it on white people. This is how they do things in America. So they decided to do this experimental procedure at these sanatoriums to see if it would work or not. And this was the theory. The theory was to deflate the lungs and have her breathing through a respirator, and then to squeeze the lungs, each lung, to squeeze each lung really tight, so that's like a ball, and then blow air back into the lung, and the hope was that all the tuberculosis would accumulate in one spot of the lung, and then all they would have to do is just cut it off and then sew the lung back up. That was the idea. So they were asking for Indians to volunteer, and my mother said she would. Yeah, she would volunteer. Because my mother, most of this time, she was laying on her back. And every day there was at least one Indian dying. Whenever they closed all the doors to the hospital rooms, that meant somebody died. And you could hear them wheeling the hospital bed down the hallway. So they knew somebody died. So that's why my mother really didn't like it when people slammed doors, because it gives her this rugged feeling. So during that time, she would visualize herself being healthy, alive, doing things, helping others. She would visualize that every day. And all day she would be saying, when she's alone, all day she would be saying, I want to live, I want to live, I will live. So she was visualizing using her voice too. I don't know what you would call that. Vocalization? I don't know. Because visualize is to visualize the future, yeah? But she would do this. Yes, she would visualize riding horse, being healthy, doing things, like I said. And then she would, throughout the day when she was alone, she would be saying, I want to live, I want to live. She would just focus on living. And so when this idea came that these doctors had, and they asked for Native American Indian patients to volunteer, my mother volunteered immediately. And they told her, they said, there's a chance that she could die. Because look at this. They're going to put her on a breathing machine and they're going to deflate her lungs. This is a serious thing. And she could die. But she said, I would rather die fighting, she said, rather than just lay here and be in pain. Yeah? So I want to try. She said, I want to try. I don't want to suffer anymore. So they took her, and that's what they did. Yeah, they put her on a breathing machine, a respirator, and then they deflated her lungs. Yeah, they cut open her chest and broke open her rib cage, and they deflated her lungs, and then they squeezed each lung into a ball. Yeah, waited for a few seconds, and then they blew air back into her lungs, and sure enough, all the tuberculosis went to one area. So one of her lungs, there wasn't that much. They got it out. But the other lung had a lot of tuberculosis in it. So they cut it out. But they couldn't get all of it, yeah, because it was just little tiny parts went to another part of the lung and they couldn't get it. But they got most of it out. And so one of her lungs was very small, and the other one was basically normal sized. But she lived. She made it. Yeah? So after some physical therapy, she was, because she had to learn to walk again. She was on her back all those years. So when she said when she sat up, she really got dizzy. The room started to spin. But my mother got into some kind of program in Rapid City to receive an education. She did not want to go back to the reservation because there was nothing to do. And she didn't even know her brothers and sisters. Because remember, from 11 to 18 years old, she was in this hospital. She missed out on her teenage excitement. She totally missed out on that. So she didn't really know her brothers and sister. And there's nothing to do because they live out in the ranch, and she was young and she wanted to do some things. So she decided to stay in Rapid City. And this rehabilitation program found her a house to stay in. It was a woman's house, single women. And it was run by some nuns, so they had very strict rules. But that's a place for her to live. And she received the education in working in a museum. In those days, there was a museum called Sioux Indian Museum in Rapid City. And it was downtown. One side was Main Street and the other side was St. Joe Street. And so she worked there and she stayed at this house. And at this house, there were white women and black women and other Native women. And they became really good friends. So they would do things on the weekends together. Yeah, they would go to movies, restaurant, concerts, and just have a good time. And she saw that her white friends were very nice ladies, and her black friends too. And she was like, you take the time to know somebody, you might have a really good friend. It doesn't matter what color their skin is. See, she's learning this firsthand. And that's what I learned from her. So I'm that way. Yeah, I take the time to know somebody. From my mother, I learned that all skin colors are beautiful. You can have friends anywhere, but you have to find out. You have to take the time to find out what kind of people they are, because sometimes people will be really friendly at first, but when discussion gets kind of personal, you find out you don't like that person. This happened to me one time when I was at university in Utah. I was in a piano class and we all had to do this recital. And I decided to write my own music, yeah, my own recital music. I really got fancy, yeah, because in those days I like to show off. Show off my skills. Be all emotional and all that kind of thing. So I wrote my own piano piece. And so after we got done, there was a little reception for all us piano students. And this one guy seemed to be hanging around by himself. So he came up to me and he said, "Hey, I really like your piano song. I never heard that before." And I said, "Yeah, because I wrote it." He said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, cool." So then we found a place to sit down and we were talking music. And then it started. I said, "Yeah, really, I'm more of a guitar player." He said, "Yeah, me too." He said. He started talking about his guitar collection. It was really impressive. So we were really getting along good, and I thought, wow, maybe this could be a friend, because he's a guitarist too, because I play guitar. And my ride was getting ready to go now, and so he said, "David, should we get going?" He said, I said, "Yeah, so no problem." So I said, "Hey, it's really nice to meet you." And I extended my hand to shake his hand, and he looked at me and he said, "No, I don't think so." He said, and then my ride, he's an Italian from New York City, and my ride said, "David, let's go." He said that immediately. I said, "Okay." So we left, and I said, "Oh, that was weird." I was having such a wonderful discussion with this dude, and at the end, his face changed, everything changed, and I was like, "What was that about?" And my ride, the Italian guy, when I say ride, for those of you in Europe, to get to the piano recital, it was at our piano teacher's house. And she lived in a mansion. She had 10 pianos. I'm not joking, grand pianos. She was kind of a wealthy lady. And I didn't have a car, and the bus did not go near her house. So this Italian guy, he was another student, and we were in the same class. We're all in the same class. And he lived close to where I lived, and he said he could give me a ride. So he dropped by, and we drove to the class. He's a really nice guy, yeah, this Italian guy. So when I say my ride, that's what I mean. Yeah, he gave me a ride from my place to the piano recital. And he said, "David, did you see that guy's finger?" And I said, "No." He said, he's wearing a ring that a lot of people in the Ku Klux Klan, they have this ring, he said. There's a certain symbol they use on there. And they said there's a lot of neo-Nazi people in Idaho, Utah, because we were in Utah, northern Utah. He said there's a lot of neo-Nazi people here in northern Utah and southern Idaho. So I was like, holy. I was talking to either a Ku Klux Klan guy or a Aryan Nations guy. He was a racist. And so I was wondering, why was he talking to me in the first place? Because I'm an Indian. Why is the racist coming up to talk to me? And the Italian guy said, well, there was nobody talking to him. He was just sitting on a couch by himself, he said. And maybe he just needed somebody to talk to. Or maybe he was trying to trick you. Yeah, maybe he was trying to say, hey, let's go have some drinks and take you someplace and beat you up or something. You never know, he said. So he probably had an ulterior motive. So he really seemed nice, but when things got personal, like I extended my hand to shake his hand in friendship, and he said, no, I don't think so. He just looked away, didn't shake my hand. That really shocked me. Then it turned out he's a racist. You see what I mean? So it's worth it to take the time to really check somebody out, because they might seem friendly at first. But when you really get to the nitty-gritty, you find out that they're not good people at all. This is what I learned from my mother. So it works the other way too, you know. Sometimes people can be okay. Maybe they don't seem friendly, but as you get to know each other, you realize, hey, we got a lot of things in common. And you maybe even have the same kind of humor, and next thing you know, you're best friends. That happened to me before. Yeah. And so the opposite happened to me. Somebody just seemed okay, but as you got to know them, it turned out really good, and we ended up becoming best friends. So what we are learning is that underneath it all, the skin color is just the wrapper. And what's important is underneath, inside of you. And you have to take time to find that out. Another thing I learned from my mother was visualization. She was doing this when she was in the hospital. She wanted to live. I want to live. I want to live. And she would visualize her future of being healthy and doing things, helping people like that. I learned that from her. And after I was born and my mother got married, we were a family for about 2 years, and my dad started to become an alcoholic. And my mother did not want to live like that. So we were living on his reservation, which is the Rosebud Sioux Reservation. So once he started to mess up, then we left. We went to her reservation, and that's where I grew up. But when we returned to her reservation, her family, they didn't like her, and they did not like me. And the reason why is because, see, in those days, Indians were strong Christians. And there is a verse in the New Testament in Matthew. Since it's Sunday, this is our church lesson for today. In Matthew chapter 19, and I think in chapter 5 too, it says that when you divorce your partner and marry a second time, you're forcing your new partner and your ex-partner and yourself to live in adultery. And any child born from a second marriage onwards, because some people get married 3, 4, 5 times, yeah? Basically, they're saying that the only children that are good in the eyes of God are the children from the first marriage. Children from other marriages are not good in the eyes of God. They're bastards. That's what it says. So Indians were trying to follow rules from the Bible in those days. So my father, when he married my mother, this was his second marriage. His first one ended in divorce. And so because of that, my mother's parents, they were Christians, so they believed that my father was forcing their daughter, my mother, to live in adultery. And when I was born, see, I'm a child of a second marriage. So this means that I'm not good, that I am a bastard, I'm an abomination in God's eyes. So my mother's relatives, they looked down on her, and they looked down on me. Her cousins told their children not to play with me because I'm bad. So I had cousins that really treated me mean. So my mother would keep me close to her as a baby, so nobody would do anything bad to me. And sometimes we would go out to the country and in the summertime and have a picnic, and we're just by ourselves. And she had her own car. So from this experience, we both learn there's good Indians and there's bad Indians. So these are things that I learned from my mom. That just because you're Indian doesn't mean you're good. And just because you're white doesn't mean you're bad. It's what's underneath. You have to take the time to find that out. That's what's going to tell if somebody is good or bad. You have to take that time to explore that, to check it out. One time I was asked to perform with this Native American dance group. I was going to do my modern music, contemporary music. And so we met at this place called Radebeul, Germany, and it was in May 5th weekend in 2005. And these guys, just because I was an Indian, they're all like, yeah, let's get together. And what do you think they wanted to do? Get drunk. I don't drink alcohol. But these guys are from the res too. From the Crow Indians and Blackfoot and all enemies. Yeah? All enemy tribes. But I did not want to get drunk. So that kind of pissed me off that they thought that just because I'm Indian that I get drunk. And these are Indians. Yeah? These are Indians. And I just said, no, I'm sorry, I don't do that. And I'm kind of tired, so I'm going to go sleep early. Oh, okay. They'd say. They were cool with it. But I didn't like that. Because on many reservations, people have a war against alcohol. Because Indians and Asians, see, we're missing an enzyme. And because of this, we can become alcoholics really fast. And our women, when they drink during pregnancy, they have babies that are severely deformed because of this. That's called fetal alcohol syndrome. So because of that, many tribes have declared war against alcohol. So to come to Europe and meet other Indians and then I find out, shit, they all get drunk. I don't want to have anything to do with that. Just because I'm Indian and I see another Indian, that doesn't mean he's going to be a good guy. Do you see what I mean? So I take the time to know somebody, even if he's Indian. Because he might not be a good Indian. He might be a bad Indian. So I don't hang around with people just because they're Indian or not. Because of the wonderful things that I learned from my mother. I'll take the time to check people out. And you'll have good friends, she said. And that's what I do. So I have good friends. Sister friends in Ireland, Spain, all over the world. So I learned that from her. And visualization, I learned that from my mother. To take chances to better your life, I learned that from my mother. Because otherwise you'll be wondering, what would have happened if only I did that? I don't want to be living like that. If something doesn't work, you learn from it. Yeah? And that's okay. That's still knowledge. That's wisdom. And those are blessings too. So even if something doesn't work that you try, you still can learn from it. That way it's not a mistake. It's a teacher. And sometimes those things come to you. Those difficult experiences, they just happen to you. So you do the same thing. You just learn from it and make the best of it. If it makes you feel a certain way, express the emotion, talk to somebody. But do it all constructively so nobody gets hurt, including yourself. And it opens your mind. So you start bringing your mind in. You say, "Oh, what can I learn from this? And how can I make the best of this?" And you receive knowledge and wisdom and peace, and those are all blessings. It's not a mistake. Difficulties are not bad as long as you learn from it and make the best of it. That you make it into a blessing. But if you don't do that, then you make it into a mistake. It's not a mistake, but you make it into a mistake when you neglect it, when you refuse to learn from it. So these are the kind of things I learned from my mother. When I was a little boy, on Sundays, my mother would be making bean soup and fried potatoes with onions and baked bread. Gee, that smelled good. Yeah? And she would have the radio on in the kitchen listening to music. There was a polka hour on Sundays from this radio station, AM radio. In the afternoon, they had a polka show. And so I'm smelling all that good food and listening to that music. I would play with my little cars by the kitchen door, my head going up and down to the polka beats. And that's where she realized that I might be a musician. And then my mother introduced me to rock and roll. She had lots of records. I think my mother might have been a musician, yeah. If she didn't have tuberculosis, maybe she would have become a musician. Who knows? Because she really liked music. Anyway, she would let me listen to her records, and one time I was listening to the Beatles on my records. I had a record album called Meet the Beatles, which today is really, really rare. I think I was 6, 7 years old. Oh, I had some valuable records. But back then, you don't know that, yeah? So my mom came into my room and she said, "David, come in here and look. This band is all kids," she said. So I was like, "Huh? Kids in a band?" So I ran into the living room and Ed Sullivan show was coming on. It was Sunday evening and here it was the Jackson 5. This is Michael Jackson and his brothers. My mother never said, "Look at these black kids." She never said they were black. She said, "Come look at these kids." And when I saw them, I saw kids. I didn't say black. Another time she bought me a record and she said, you have to listen to this guy. He plays guitar and he sings and I really like his music. Maybe you will too. And she put this record on and let me look at the cover because it was a gift. And Johnny B. Good started. It was Chuck Berry. She never said, "Look, listen to this black man." She never said that. She said, "Listen to this guy." She never called people by the color of their skin. And I learned that from her. Another time in school, I was 7th grade, so this would put me at 12 years old. And it was a social science class, and the teacher came in at the beginning of class, and he said, "I have a question." He said, "I'm just curious." He said, "Can any of you, in your mind, would it be possible in your future that maybe you marry somebody who's black? If you can, raise your hand." Well, I had to sit in the front of the class because I was supposed to wear glasses, but I didn't like them because they looked just funny. So the teachers put me in the front row so I could see the chalkboard. So I sat in the front row, so my hand went up right away after I heard people laughing. And then the teacher said, "I am really disappointed in this class." He said, "There's only one enlightened soul in this class." He said, I looked around. I was the only one with my hand in the air. Because to me, it doesn't matter what the skin color is. If she's pretty, she's pretty. If I like her and she likes me and we fall in love, I don't care what color her skin is. Because in my life, I found that you talk to somebody and suddenly you start becoming attracted to each other, and one thing leads to the next, and pretty soon you're smooching, and pretty soon you're at McDonald's eating fries. I was like, oh, geez, what's wrong with these people? These other students, they were laughing. Ha ha, Dave is going to marry a black girl. Ha ha ha. They would say that. And I was like, what's the problem? Because, see, at that time, I had a really mean crush on Lieutenant Uhura from Star Trek. That's a pretty woman. And there used to be this TV show called The Dean Martin Show. And sometimes he would have this singer on there named Lola Falana. That lady was pretty. And she was black. So the teacher, he said, thanks, Dave. He said, thanks for being the kind of person you are. This is stuff that I learned from my mother. Like I said, when my mother and father got married and my father began to mess up, and she didn't want to live like that, so she left. But sometimes situations go bad, and the best thing to do is just to get the hell out of there and lick your wounds and learn from the experience and continue on. Learning from difficulty led me to a better situation. That's something I learned from my mother too. She left her marriage because my dad was screwing up, and she became a teacher. Years later, we got our own house, and she worked with 3- and 4-year-old children, and she wanted the Indian kids and the white kids to play together and to do things together. So hopefully they'll remember that. And she taught for 30 years. And she taught 3 generations of people. So it was good to see that, yeah. Sometimes we're at the store and some guy who's my age might come up to her and he'd say, hi, teacher. He'll say, it'd be a white guy, yeah. And then his child would say, hi, teacher. They both had my mother as their teacher, yeah. This is really nice. This guy is my age, yeah. Hi, teacher, he'd say. Teacher. So they would give my mother hugs. And she really touched a lot of children's lives this way. That they saw people beyond the skin color. So my mother influenced a lot of people. She was true to her visualizations when she was sick, visualizing helping people. She was an amazing woman. She was a warrior. And that's what I learned from her. Grew up in a single parent household, and I came out just fine. Here I am, saving our language, teaching all over the world, spreading this information from our culture to help others, to influence others to live in a healthy way. And all this because I learned this from my mother. It's so amazing how parts of your body communicating with other parts of your body. Your brain sending a signal to your knee, hey, get up, we're going to dance. You hear music and your body wants to move to the beat. Or you see somebody you're really attracted to, so your body gets all excited and things like this. But everything that's happening inside your body is just amazing. It's really, really amazing. So we should be taking care of this. We should be nurturing our bodies, because sometimes if we neglect it, we could be shortening our lives. Like when we become addicted to substances that are not good for us, like alcohol, drugs, cigarettes,
coffee. Coffee's a good thing, but some people really become addicted to it. That's a dangerous thing. Me, I like coffee, but I don't drink it all day long. I don't need it all day long. I like smelling it when I'm waking up, but I like smelling bacon too when I wake up. We really should be able to find a way, whether it's a video or something, to really look at what your body's doing to help you live. How your lungs are working. If you'd see the wonderful things that your lungs are doing, and then you look at what tobacco does, that it's destroying things in your lungs, maybe it'll make us think twice. One example I like to use is the story of my mother. My mother got tuberculosis when she was 11 years old. The stories that my mother tells are just, hey, he's a holy man. They really humble you. Like, for example, she would say when the nurses would go up and down the hallways closing all the doors, and then you hear wheels going by really fast, and then you know, she said, that somebody died. So then they disposed of the body. I don't know if they burned it or what they did. So it gets to your head. And so that's why she didn't like to hear door slams. And she would say to herself, I want to live. All day she'd be saying, I want to live. I just want to live. I don't care what happens, but I want to live, she would say. To make a long story short, some doctors in America had an idea in treating tuberculosis, and the idea was to open up the body cavity, and then what they're going to do is they're going to put you on a respirator, and then they squeeze your lungs, and then they blow air back into the lungs. And the theory was that all the tuberculosis should be stuck together in one part of the lung. And then they cut that part out. The rest of the lung is okay. So that's what they did to my mother, and it worked. They got rid of most of it. But they said that it's possible that there might still be small parts there, but they're not doing anything. So the doctors told my mom to be careful when she gets cold, because a cold or pneumonia might wake them up again. That's what they told her. So she was always careful in the wintertime. So one of my mother's lungs was smaller than the other. She lived longer than a lot of people thought she would. She always would say, I want to live. Every day. Yeah. She stayed on her back for 6 years in the hospital until she had this operation. When the tuberculosis was cut off her lungs, she had to learn how to walk again. So she said when she sat up, she was really dizzy. She didn't sit up for all those years. So the first time she sat up, she was really dizzy. She said the floor seemed like it was way over there. So she had to learn how to walk again. But she said she wanted to live, so she was going to do it. She had a fighting spirit. She had a warrior spirit. So she would really get angry at her brothers because they were always drinking alcohol and they became alcoholics. And she would be always angry at them and saying, look, you're ruining your liver. You're getting cirrhosis of the liver. You're ruining that and you don't even realize you're killing yourself. And her brothers would just laugh and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And sure enough, they all died of cirrhosis of the liver. And all of that could have been alleviated if they had taken care of themselves. So my mother would get really upset about, geez, look at all these teenagers walking around smoking cigarettes and doing all these ridiculous things. And she said, you don't know what it's like until you get deathly sick. People really take their bodies for granted. So that's something I always remembered from my mom. These stories that she told me. She told me lots of stories about how it was for her in this hospital. She made friends with Indians from other parts of America and some Cree Indians. It was really, really sadder than hell. They weren't able to do things like they used to. And a lot of them did not make it out. The tuberculosis took them. It took them and they died never seeing their families. They died in those hospitals. And my mom said, I just wanted to live. So every day my mom would visualize. She would visualize every day walking. She would visualize riding a horse. She would visualize the future of dancing, of running, and having a good time. Every day she did this visualization. And this is why I talk about this a lot on this show. The visualization is very powerful because it puts something in your brain to help you. And it got her through. So after she had this operation and she got better and they helped her find a job, and she went back to the reservation for a while, but she found there's nothing to do, she said. So she came back to Rapid City. She worked at the Sioux Indian Museum. And there was a government program that helped her to get a car. And she got a job on the Rosebud Sioux Reservation and met my dad. And 2 years later, I was born. Yeah, so my mom, to hear her stories, those things always stuck in my mind. The visualizing and what happened in these hospitals. It was really, really difficult. But the one thing that I remember the most is my mother saying, I want to live. I want to live. And then she would do these visualizations every day. That's how she entertained herself. Every day she would visualize being out in the country, riding horse, going into the creeks to pick choke cherries and go swimming and go fishing. She would visualize these things every day. That made her feel good. She was getting medicine from the future. So when she got better, she was like, I'm not just going to lay around. I'm going to live my life. I am going to live my life. I'm not just going to lay around and do nothing. So she was very active. Even though she had only one good lung to help her breathe, she was still very active and doing all kinds of things. It's remarkable what she accomplished in her life. So she really touched a lot of people's lives. And this is amazing, that what she did to try to bring people together regardless of what color their skin is. So I think a lot of Native and non-Native children, my mother played a huge role in their lives so that they get along with each other. She influenced them so they would not be racist towards each other. In large part, she was successful in that because she wanted to live. I want to live. I want to live. I just want to live. And then when you make it, then you do a damn good job with what you have. With whatever it is that you have, you use it the best that you can, the best way that you can. You don't need to have a doctorate education or whatever. It's just whatever your talent is, do the best with that talent. And that's what she did. And as a result, she affected generations of people in a really, really good way so that they don't see each other as race. And that's my mother. And so I try to be that way too. So this is why I talk about these things too. You know, visualization is very, very important. My mother showed me that No matter how difficult your past is, you can transform it into something beautiful. That's what she did. That with this horrendous past of having this disease, she just missed out on all her teenage years, but still managed to make it through. So it's one hell of a accomplishment that my mother did. So don't take your body for granted. You're made to move around and put healthy foods in your bodies. You don't have to be extreme, but you just make it a little healthier. That's all. Little bit by little bit. And slowly you'll get there. Visualize and do it.